Okay, great. Then I'll go ahead and begin. Very warm welcome to everybody. So glad you're here for this information session. I'm going to be speaking about the Master of Studies in Mindfulness-Based Cognitive Therapy here at the University of Oxford. I have a set of slides full of information. I'll present that. Should take approximately half an hour. And then there will be time for Q&A at the end. And I think you have a Q&A box where you can write your questions in. And then I'll address as many of them as possible at the end. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so what we'll do in this short session is just a few topics that you see here, a little bit of introductions about who is part of this master's program, an overview of the program, teaching staff, who the course is for, and then some details about the course that I'll go into, entry requirements, and then the Q&A, as I said before. All right, so this is me here on the right. I'm the director of the course. My background field is clinical psychology. I've been a mindfulness researcher and teacher, trainer, supervisor, and practitioner for many years now. Most of my career was in the States, University of Kentucky. I was a psychology professor and then moved to Oxford in 2019. And I've been here since then, working with this master's degree and also with the Oxford Mindfulness Foundation, which also does a lot of mindfulness teaching and training. In research, I have a lot of topics that I've done work in: conceptualization and assessment of mindfulness, effects of mindfulness-based programs, the mechanisms of change. And I'm also interested in the potential for harm and adverse events in mindfulness practice and how we work with that. So a number of research topics, but I spend most of my time now on teaching and training with this master's degree as my main focus. So an overview: this is a 2-year part-time course. It is jointly offered by Oxford Lifelong Learning, which is part of the Department for Continuing Education, and also the Department of Psychiatry. We have a combination in this master's of in-person teaching and online teaching. I'll say more about the details of that shortly. Our cohort size is generally 16. We might have just a very small amount more than that, perhaps some chance of maybe 17, 18, or we might have just a bit less, but in general, 16 students per cohort. And we take in a new cohort in alternating years. Our next intake is for October 2026. All right, so other teaching staff besides me: Chris Cullen is the senior tutor. He has a lot of background in the Buddhist psychology area, which is part of this course. And then he also does a lot of general teaching and training. Liz Lord is our third member of the teaching staff, and her background is in education. She's a really experienced mindfulness teacher and trainer. Professor Willem Kijken, who's here at the University of Oxford, is one of our guest tutors. He has a really important research background with depression. And then Professor Mark Williams is another one of our guest tutors. You might recognize him as one of the developers of mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. So we're very honored to have him come and do a bit of teaching for us. Several other guest tutors with expertise in various specialized topics: neuroscience and mindfulness. We have someone for mental health awareness, we get a really good training there, professional competencies of other sorts. And at the end of the course, we have a day on mindfulness in the wider world, how this applies to larger issues. And we have a really good collection of guest teachers who come in and explore these topics with us. Okay, so moving on to who the course is for, what we're looking for in applicants is professionals who already have a professional field and who would like to bring evidence-based mindfulness teaching into your work that you're already doing. So you might, for example, be in one of the mental health professions or physical health professions, or you could possibly be in the education field or doing some sort of skills training in some context, or perhaps you specialize in stress reduction or wellness in some context. We're fairly flexible, really. It could be some other context that involves working with individuals and groups in supportive ways. It's pretty open, but we do like to see that there is a professional background that applicants have already, and that they're working in a field where it would make sense to bring mindfulness courses into the work that you already do. Our students come from many parts of the world. In the current cohort or recent cohorts, we have people from the UK and Europe. We have people from North and South America, China, India, Africa, and we've even had a couple of people from Australia, although the time zone issue is quite difficult in Australia. I'll say a little bit more about the time zone issue as I go along. But we're very much wide open in terms of where people are from. Now, to say a little bit about the qualities of this course, I have here unique qualities. I think this is a unique course in this really important way. On the left, you can see that there's quite a lot of academic and professional rigor, the high standards that we would, of course, expect from a distinguished university like the University of Oxford. And over there on the right, you can see that we also take very seriously the basic attitudes that are part of mindfulness, kindness and openness. And so what that means is that the atmosphere of the course is very warm, it's respectful and supportive, very collegial. And as it says here, it provides space to experiment and to grow as a mindfulness teacher. So it's a nice place to be, this course. Another thing to say about unique qualities, a unique quality about mindfulness in particular. When someone is learning to teach mindfulness, there's this intermixing or intertwining of personal development and professional development. And so the personal development is focused on the mindfulness practice itself. We believe that personal mindfulness practice is essential for developing the skills needed to develop the self-awareness and the insight to teach mindfulness for other people. And so the course is very supportive of students' development of their own mindfulness practice. We do expect that you have experience with mindfulness practice when you apply, but if you get a place on the course, you can expect quite a lot of support for continuing and developing your mindfulness practice. Here we have the main areas of practice and study. So there's a fair amount of theory and research. Some of this comes from psychological science, and some of it comes from Buddhist psychology. And we explore the interesting ways that those two traditions overlap and intersect. There's also, as I was just saying, quite a lot of emphasis on experiential understanding of mindfulness. By that, we mean understanding mindfulness from your own experience with practicing it. A lot of support for that. And then, of course, there's the teaching skills and the professional competencies. This is really central. We are training you to teach evidence-based mindfulness courses, so that part's really important. And then skills for communicating about mindfulness. Part of that is the teaching skills, but there's also written work and the occasional presentation, being able to speak clearly and ethically about mindfulness. We use quite a range of teaching and learning methods. So there's a fair amount of experiential learning, guided and independent practice, quite a lot of skills training. We practice teaching skills with feedback, self-feedback, feedback from your peers and the teaching team. We have presentations with discussion, independent reading. We will ask you to keep a reflective journal while you're in this course. And also there's tutoring and supervision. I'll say more about that in a moment. And there's a set of marked assignments. The way the course is organized, you can see here, as I said before, it's a 2-year part-time course. So each academic year has the same basic structure. In each year, there will be 2 in-person teaching blocks in Oxford, one in the autumn and one in the early summer, generally June. Each of those blocks is 4 or 5 days, and it's in Oxford, as it says there. So there is an expectation that everybody comes to Oxford for these 2 blocks each year, one in the autumn and one in the early summer. And then we also have an in-person retreat that's between the 2 blocks. It says Retreat Center in England. For some time, we have been holding our retreats at a really lovely place, Sharpham House in Devon. It's a great place to have these retreats. Quiet and beautiful and very good support for retreats. In the winter, spring, the first year one is, I think, February, and the second year one is April, and the retreat, first one's 5 days, and the second one is 6 days. And then in between these in-person experiences, we have online teaching days. We use the Zoom platform for these. We run these days from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. UK time. So each one of these days is kind of an intensive experience, 8 hours with breaks, of course. Some of these days on Zoom are once a week. There are some periods of time where we're doing Zoom days once a week. And then there are other periods of time when there are longer gaps in between the Zoom days when you might be doing something else. So it says weekly or other intervals. Then there's the tutoring aspect of the course. Each student is allocated a tutor who is one of the teaching staff. And throughout the course, you have individual meetings with your tutor, generally 6 times a year for 30 minutes each time, though we do have some flexibility about that. And tutoring is really for discussion of any aspect of the course that you might feel that you need to discuss. You might want to talk about how your personal practice is going, how your knowledge and skills are developing. You can use tutoring meetings to get feedback on drafts of written assignments. And you might have other questions or concerns or any other topic of interest that comes up related to the course. The tutoring meetings are very flexible and open and designed to be really supportive. Now, here's a little bit of a description about the marked assignments. The first is Essay 1. This is on the topic of psychological science foundations, and it's 4,000 words. There will be presentations in advance of this, and you get several specific essay questions that you can choose from with recommended readings. The next assignment is called the reflective analysis, also 4,000 words. And here what we're asking you to do is integrate your experiences with your personal mindfulness practice, what you've been noticing in your practice, what you've been learning from it, and integrate that with the theory and the research that you're learning about as part of the course. So Essay 1 is in the spring of year 1, and the reflective analysis is summer of year 1. Then comes Essay 2. This is in the autumn of year 2, also 4,000 words. And this one is about the Buddhist psychology foundations. The dissertation is near the end. It's a bigger piece of work, 10,000 words. Here you have a lot of flexibility about your topic. With support from your tutor, you can choose your own topic for the dissertation, some topic that's related to mindfulness and MBCT, and we hope that is of great interest to you so that it provides an opportunity for you to really dig into and explore something that you have a particular interest in. And then there's also the teaching project. The teaching project has 2 elements that are marked. One of them is the write-up or the report. It's 4,000 words. And then the other element is recordings. You make recordings of yourself teaching an MBCT course. And we will ask you to teach 2 MBCT courses. These are 8-week courses, as most of you probably know. You will have supervision from members of the teaching team. So you teach your 2 courses, you make recordings. Generally, the second one goes a bit better than the first one. And so you would submit the recordings of yourself teaching the second one along with this write-up. You may be aware, if you know very much about mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, that it has expanded over the years to be now a whole collection of curricula. We speak about this as the MBCT family of curricula, and here I'm showing you some of them. The second one, Mindfulness for Life by Willem Kuyken. This is the curriculum that we spend the most time on. And these are pictures of the books that describe these. So the second one, Mindfulness for Life, that's the most comprehensive of these curricula and the one that's used in the most greatest variety of contexts and settings. So we spend most of our time on that one. When you learn to teach that one, you are then pretty well equipped to learn to teach the other ones. And so we have some additional training on the original curriculum, which is the one for depression. And we have additional training also, all part of the master's, on the Finding Peace in a Frantic World curriculum. And this short one, Introducing Mindfulness, this is more recently developed. This one is only 3 sessions, 1 hour each, really helpful in settings where people don't have a lot of time to commit to a mindfulness course, and we will teach you how to do that one. So we'll teach you how to do the first 4. The one on the right here, Deeper Mindfulness, we don't provide complete training for that one. The complete training for that one takes too much time for us to be able to fit it into this master's, but we will give you a really nice introduction to it, and then you could decide if you wanted to go on and do the complete training for that one. So you would come out of this master's well equipped to teach the main curricula and with an introduction to that one on the right. Okay, so now getting down to the requirements. An undergraduate degree. If your degree is from the UK, then this is from the university's website, a first class or strong upper second class undergraduate degree with honors in relevant subject. We actually do have some flexibility about that. We have had a very small number of cases where a person didn't have an undergraduate degree at all. That's quite rare. But I would say, if you don't exactly fit this, please do be in touch. There is generally some flexibility about this. If your degree is not from the UK, then you would need to look at the international qualifications page on the University of Oxford website. If you end up still having questions, then again, please do be in touch about that. More entry requirements. As I was saying before, when I talked about who this course is designed for, we would like you to have professional experience in one of these fields or something like it. So just to repeat them again, mental health or physical health, education or skills training, stress reduction or wellness, or it could be something else, as long as it involves working with people in supportive ways. Also, we would like you to have a background that equips you to read relevant theoretical and scientific literature. So for the 2 essays in particular, and of course for the dissertation, you will need to read published papers or book chapters about mindfulness and MBCT, and for your dissertation, whatever the specific topics are. So some background that equips you to read academic papers and to understand them and to be able to think critically about them, that's also really important. It's great to have some knowledge of mindfulness-based approaches. You don't have to be an expert on anything, of course. That's partly what this master's degree is for, but it's good to have some familiarity with mindfulness-based approaches, evidence-based ones. It is important to complete a Mindfulness for Life, also known as MBCTL course, as a participant. This can be in person or online, preferably taught by an experienced provider. And I do suggest the Oxford Mindfulness Foundation, they offer a lot of these courses, but it doesn't have to be an OMF course. It could be offered by somebody else. This is something that we do get questions about pretty often. People will write in and say, I've done MBSR, does that count? Or I've done the original MBCT for depression, does that count? And we are quite strict about this one. It has to be MBCT for Life or MBCTL. That's because this is the one that we're spending most of our time and energy on in the teaching and the masters. And we want to be sure that everybody has experienced it as a participant so that they have a kind of an insider's sense of what this course is like. And also it's an opportunity to confirm for yourself that you really are interested in learning how to teach this for other people. All right, so continuing on, personal experience of insight meditation practice. At the very least, if you've done an MBCTL course, you have experience with those practices. It's great if you have other experience with insight meditation. Experience of working with or facilitating groups. This is also quite flexible. You could have done a wide variety of things, but we like to see some experience where teaching or training or facilitating or in some way working with people in groups. MBCT is a group-oriented program, so that kind of background experience is really helpful. And then this last one is also really important: access to suitable groups to teach MBCT. So the masters cannot provide you with a group of people to teach. We don't have access to that sort of thing. And as I was saying before, what we're really interested in is people who are already working in some context or setting, professional setting, where it would make sense for you to bring in teaching of mindfulness courses to what you're already doing. So we are going to be interested to find out, who do you intend to teach? And is it realistic for you to be able to recruit people to be in your MBCT courses? If you don't answer that within the application itself, and we find your application promising and invite you for an interview, we will definitely ask you these questions in the interview. Who do you intend to teach? And is that realistic? Can you recruit people to be in your groups? Carrying on with entry requirements, there is a very strong requirement for proficiency in English. The University of Oxford has a couple of levels of that, and the higher level of proficiency is required. If your first language is not English, you may need to show that you meet this requirement. The university has a list of accepted tests of English language proficiency, and you might need to take one of those and enter your scores in. There is also there's also a provision for not having to do that if you have completed an academic program in English in the past. For our purposes for this course, we are especially interested in spoken English. The reason for that, there's two really. One is that teaching mindfulness in a skillful way requires some quite nuanced ways of speaking. Use of language in mindfulness teaching is nuanced. And the other thing is that we have to require that you do your teaching project in English. We occasionally have students who would probably prefer to do their teaching project in their first language. And once they have finished this master's, they of course are free to do that if that would make sense for them. But we can't supervise if you're not teaching in English, and the marking is not, it's not feasible for us to do the marking if your teaching is not in English. So you need to be able to teach these courses in English, and that does require good proficiency in English. You can look at the University of Oxford website for more details in general, but if you have questions about the mindfulness teaching in English with us, it might be best to contact one of us for questions about that. Okay, so applications will be opening soon. The deadlines, we're going to have two deadlines. The first one will be the 28th of January. And that is also the latest deadline for most Oxford scholarships. And then we will have a second deadline in early March, as you can see there. So my recommendation would be, if you're interested, to try your best to get your application in by the first deadline, 28th of January. We will review all the applications we have shortly after that deadline, and we will hold some interviews. And it's possible that we might fill the cohort at that point. We just can't be sure. We might or we might not. If we haven't, then there's a second deadline in March. And then, as it says below, applications may remain open after this deadline if places are still available. So it's very hard for us to predict how this is going to go. So on one hand, as I say, get your application in soon to have the best chance, I would say, but then you never know. There may remain chances after that. And then here, this last sentence, please note that college places are not guaranteed. Application for which college to be in is kind of a separate thing. We might have time at the end in Q&A if anybody has questions about how that is working. These are just a few quotations from students who have done this course in the past, things that they have said about it. So here's one that says, welcoming, compassionate, and kind learning environment. That is something that we value highly, so it's lovely to see students saying that. The second one says, the quality of the teaching amazed me. Even the hard to digest topics were explained very skillfully with patience and kindness. And here's one that says the course is well structured and the pacing is just right. So of course, it's very heartwarming for me to see this kind of feedback written. It is all very consistent with what we are very much committed to, and we work hard to make the course into this type of experience. Okay, so this last slide here is contact information. As I say, there's a web page that's not available at the present time, but it should be before long, so don't worry about that. Plenty of time before the January deadline. And then other contact information here, social media things. And I think that is all. So now is time for Q&A. I'm going to stop the screen sharing. And let me see if I can now go to the Q&A. We are. Okay, I'll just read out the questions that I can see here in the Q&A box. This one says, are students expected to cover the accommodation costs for both the classes and the retreat? And the answer is yes, for the in-person teaching. You need to find your own and pay for your own accommodation for the in-person teaching blocks. So that's twice each academic year, the autumn one and the June one. But for the retreat, the answer is no, you don't have to cover accommodation costs for that. The retreat expenses are all part of the fees that you pay for the master's program. Okay, now let me see the next one. Do you require an understanding of cognitive behavioral therapy? Any recommendations of what certification courses you would deem apt? The answer is no, you don't have to have previous training in cognitive behavioral therapy. If you know something about it already, that's great. But if you don't, that's also okay. The training that we provide is designed to be comprehensive for what you need to know to be able to teach MBCT. And so there is no need to pursue a certification in CBT unless you just want to for your own interests, but there's no requirement to do that. Okay, here's another one. Online sessions. How many of these during the 2-year period, and would they occur on a specific day of the week? They're on Mondays. Now let's see, how many of these during the 2-year period? I don't have the exact number at my fingertips exactly, but I think it is approximately 12 or so in the first year and maybe 8 or so in the second year. I should have counted that up, but it is, I'm just looking at something I have here at hand to see if that's approximately right. Yes, I think it is 12 in the first year. And I think it's about 7. These are the Zoom days in the second year. So that is pretty close. Okay, let's see now. The next one. Do you welcome people with entrepreneurship and human resource management experiences? Though they are not formal psychology qualifications, I would like to apply MBCT to corporate settings. Yes, we have quite a number of students who come to this course with interests in corporate settings. And I think the human resource management, I said before, some background experience in working with individuals and groups in supportive ways. So human resource management might be an example of that. And yeah, you don't have to have a formal psychology qualification. And workplace and corporate applications are a really important one in the mindfulness world. And so we're interested in people with that kind of background and aspirations for teaching mindfulness. Now, here's another one. Can the supervision groups still be held in our native language, or are they only in English now? There is very little that could be done in a different language. You might be able to consult with somebody separately if you needed to in a different language, but I think the best answer really is that you should expect everything in the course to be conducted in English. Can one of the suitable groups to teach be teenagers? I have to say no to that one. This course it's a good question. It's good that you brought that up. We are really focused on teaching mindfulness to adults. We do have students occasionally whose main interest is actually younger people, but we're very clear. The course is teaching you how to teach mindfulness to adults. So one student that I'm thinking of who we had in a cohort at one point was very much interested in young people within school settings. We explained, well, we don't really train you to do that, and you would need to do your teaching project with adults. And for this student, that was perfectly okay to do the teaching project with teachers and staff in a school setting. And then learning to teach teenagers was something that they would do following the master's degree, and they would have a really strong foundation for doing that from this master's degree. Okay, let's see now. By college place, do you mean belonging to a college or a college accommodation? Belonging to a college, it is every student has a college affiliation. Most of our students in this master's are at a college called Kellogg College. You could find it on the university website, I'm sure. That one is a really good fit because Kellogg is part of its mission is students who have been out in the world and are coming back now to do more education. So rather than people who are fresh out of high school or secondary school or at the postgraduate level, maybe fresh out of an undergraduate experience. So Kellogg is the one that most of our students are affiliated with, but not completely everybody. And once in a while, we have somebody who requests a different one. Accommodation is a separate matter, and Kellogg has accommodation. So some of our students, when they're here for an in-person teaching block, they might stay in Kellogg accommodation, but you don't have to. Some of them stay in Airbnbs or hotels around town. Accommodation is a separate thing. Let's see now. Next, given your explanations on who is this course for and entry requirements, how suitable is the MST and MBCT for someone like me who's looking to start a career in the mindfulness field, not coming from an established professional background? And would completing the MBCTL course qualify me for this program? Well, I think looking to start a career in the mindfulness fields, more power to you if you can do that. It is very difficult to earn a living strictly by teaching mindfulness. And this is part of why we're very careful to say explicitly that we think it makes the most sense if you're already working in a setting or a context where you could add mindfulness teaching into what you're already doing. And then the other thing is the more practical matter of when you come to the teaching project in year 2, who are you going to teach? Do you have access to people who could sign up to be in your mindfulness courses, or will you end up stranded with inability to recruit people to be in the courses that you're required to teach? And that would be an awkward situation to be in. Would completing the MBCTL course qualify? Well, that's one of the entry requirements. So yeah, we do ask you to complete an MBCTL course. And then there are all those various other considerations. So I guess I wouldn't entirely rule it out, but I would want to know a little bit more when you say you're looking to start a career in the mindfulness field, a little bit more about what you're envisaging and who you intend to teach to, and how you will recruit people, whether you have access to suitable populations to teach. I'm sure that's not an entirely clear answer, but I think that's the best I can do with the amount that I know here. You could email in and I might be able to say a little bit more. What if you were coming from another sector, for example, business and management consulting? Yes, as I was saying before, we are interested in students who might bring mindfulness into business and management settings. We just would like you to have some sort of background experience that involves working with people in supportive ways, preferably in group contexts. So, but yeah, we end up with quite a wide variety of people in this master's program. So we're inclined to think broadly, but at the same time, balance that with the background experiences that are helpful to have. Let's see. Have you had any music therapists join this program? I don't think so. I cannot think of one. I have myself quite a strong background in music, so I'm intrigued by your question. And I think music therapy is, well, music therapy, I think, can be thought of as sort of vaguely within the mental health professions. So I would say, yeah, we'd be interested in an application from somebody whose basic background profession is music therapy. That sounds quite intriguing. Same questions would apply. Who do you expect to teach to? And can you recruit people to be in mindfulness courses? But yep, that would be interesting to us, I think. Okay, let's see now. What is the minimum group size requirement for the 2 groups we need to teach as part of the master's? Well, we don't have a really set minimum, but generally what I say is do your best to recruit 8 people minimum to be in your courses. There is always, or almost always, a little bit of dropout. So if a couple of people dropped out, you'd still have 6. If it gets too much smaller than that, it starts to feel a little bit odd, and people feel a little bit more pressure to contribute, or sometimes it's harder for the inquiry periods to feel like they flow with not enough people to be contributing to them. So that's roughly what I would say. Try to get 8 for each course. All right, now let's see the next one. What is meant by having professional experience? If you're an assistant psychologist or run your own practice, does that count? Oh, yes, I definitely say so. having an MA and a BA in psychology is a plus. Well, yes, a psychology background, it definitely fits well, but it isn't essential to have a psychology background. Okay, now the next question, how do full-time professionals navigate the online full-day Zoom lessons? Yeah, well, that is a good question. Everybody does that in their own way. So you would need to be able to get a good number of Mondays off to be able to do this. I think that is just the reality. Next one. Thank you very much. Let's see. What are the top reasons or criteria you would or would not select a candidate for the course? Well, I would refer back to the entry requirements that I reviewed before. They're all important. So it's a matter of balancing those things. If I could think back to the experience of offering places to some people and not others, well, one thing I might mention is that sometimes we have an applicant who doesn't really know that much about mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, in particular MBCT. So one of the questions in our interview is, why are you interested in MBCT in particular, as opposed to MBSR or one of the many other mindfulness-based programs that are out there? Not having done an MBCTL course, although that was fairly easily rectified. I think also we were looking for, as well as I've been saying, good potential to bring this to a particular setting or context or population where there's a need for it or a good potential for it to be beneficial and to make a difference. And I think those are the main things I would say about that. Okay, next one. With the Mindfulness for Life courses online, those are usually 8 weeks. Could you still apply if you haven't finished it by the time of the deadline? Yes, you can do that. We have had people who still have their course in progress. That would be no problem at all. And let's see, could you please tell us which mindfulness programs or courses Professor Mark Williams currently teaches in the master's program? He comes and does a day for us on that last curriculum I showed you. Remember the slide that had the pictures of the 5 curricula? 4 of them are the ones that we teach you to deliver. The 5th one, we just give you an introduction. That's when Professor Williams comes, because that 5th one, Deeper Mindfulness, that's his latest course that he's developed. So he comes and does a 1-day introduction to Deeper Mindfulness. It's a lovely day. Now, let's see. If admitted students have already completed the OMF's 12-month teacher training program, would they need to take the teacher training again during the course? The answer is yes. You have to do the whole thing. We have, I think, every cohort, as best I can remember, at least since I've been working with this master's, every cohort, we have at least 1, sometimes 2 or 3 people who have done OMF's 12-month teacher training program. And I do ask, why do you want to do all this again? And people always have a good answer. Part of it is that they would like to go through the teacher training skills again and learn them a little bit more thoroughly, but perhaps more importantly, the master's offers more chance to delve into background theory and research. It's much more academically oriented. It has essays, dissertation that you need to write. So there's more reading. You have a chance to meet with tutors and discuss things. You get more presentations, guest lecturers about various topics that OMF covers only briefly or not at all. You also get supervision for teaching 2 courses, which OMF doesn't provide. Once you've finished OMF's 12-month, you're on your own to go teach your 2 courses and find your own supervision. So it might sound a little bit silly. Why would you do this whole thing again? But in fact, it isn't. There are very good reasons to do it again if you genuinely in your heart would like to do a more academically oriented program. And we very much welcome people who have done OMF's 12-month teacher training in the past. Okay, let's see, next one. Can we have access to the exact lists of when the online sessions will take place? Those dates have not yet been finalized. So I can at this point only tell you roughly. The first in-person block in October of year 1 is scheduled so that it immediately follows the matriculation date. Matriculation is a sort of a ceremony that you go to in the Sheldonian, which is this wonderful historic building. And it's generally held on a Saturday in October. And so we set up our first block to start on the Monday immediately following, but I don't have the exact dates of that in my head. And then the Mondays that we do online follow that, and they carry on well through the autumn and into January. But as I say, I don't have the exact dates at this point. We will have to decide those before too much longer, I think. So you could be in touch, and we'll make that available as soon as we can. If we have to miss a session or more, will that impact our degree outcomes? With, of course, the understanding that will impact learning to miss these days. Yes, it will impact learning. Every one of these days is very carefully designed, is very full. There's a lot of learning in every day, and we do very strongly encourage you to come to every single one of them. That's the best possible thing. Attendance, however, doesn't impact degree outcomes. So there's no number of days. If you miss that many, then you get booted out or anything like that. We provide recordings of some portions of the days, the portions that are based on presentation or that are based on discussion and Q&A that doesn't have any potential for any personal sharing that might be sensitive. But we don't record any of the skills practices that you do with each other in pairs or small groups. That would not be appropriate to record. And then for mindfulness practices, when there's discussion afterwards about experiences with mindfulness practices, sometimes that's a little bit more personal, and so we don't record that either. So if you miss a day, you can see recording of some portion of that day, and that helps you to stay caught up with the academic element, but you will just miss the skills practice or perhaps other forms of sharing and discussion. Okay, let's see. What scholarships are available for this course? The heavier online self-teaching aspect of this course makes the 2 times 17K fee. Yes, well, I do recognize the fee for many people will seem quite high. Scholarships are very limited. You will automatically, if you apply for this master's, my understanding is you will be automatically considered for whatever is available. There's very little available for this course. Occasionally, we have a student who has some independent source. For example, they might have whoever is employing them paying the fees for the course, but that's pretty unusual. I wonder if this might be one where I could ask Tom, the course administrator, if there's anything else to be said about scholarships that I might have missed here.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm Tom. I'm an administrator at Oxford Lifelong Learning, and I support Ruth in some of the administration for this program. As Ruth is saying, scholarships are a bit thin on the ground for this particular program. When you apply, you will be considered for some of the scholarships that are provided by the university, those that the structure of the program make them applicable for. There is also a scholarship search platform that's on the university website that will allow you to manually go and see if there's any specific funding that you might apply to directly. And of course, anything you can source yourself independently would likely be applicable. However, the vast majority of our students are self-funded, and it's worth being clear about that at this point. Thanks.
Thank you, Tom. And then the next one is also about funding. Are the course fees for overseas listed per year? I'm pretty sure that whatever is listed there that you're looking at, that is per year. So you would pay that for each year. Does the course provide the opportunity or the foundation to develop a new mindfulness-based intervention? We do include in the course some teaching about how to do an adaptation. So yeah, there is a bit of that. What are the common career prospects for graduates for this program? Well, here I refer back to what I've said a few times before. we don't really recommend that you apply to this program with the intention of developing a whole new career in mindfulness. What we're looking for mostly is applicants who already have some kind of professional work or career going on where it would make sense for them to add mindfulness courses, teaching mindfulness courses into what they're already doing. And that could be, as I've said before, quite a wide range of different things. All right, let's see. How does the MST and MBCT differ from the mindfulness training programs? Okay, this is the OMF again. So I think I've partially answered that, but just to review, the OMF's training program is 12 months, and it is not an academic program. It's not affiliated with a university, so you don't get a university degree or qualification from the OMF's program. And it's a very thorough teacher training program, but it doesn't have all the academic elements that I described before, with the additional teaching on theory and research, the opportunity to delve into more reading and to do writing of essays in the dissertation. It doesn't include, OMF doesn't include the supervision of 2 courses. I think those are the main points. Okay, let's see now. Background in clinical audiology. And although we have been recommended to use MBCT for people with intrusive tinnitus, we don't typically get group therapy opportunity. It is typically one-to-one counseling. I understand that group provision is best. We will be trying to set up groups, but don't have this background, just a hopefulness for the future. Well, that's all very interesting. Tinnitus there is research on mindfulness for people who have tinnitus, and that's very promising. I would say that sounds like a really good application. The main difficulty I can see there, if you were to apply to this master's, is that you would need to teach 2 courses to groups. There is interest in the mindfulness field in adapting this for one-to-one situations, and there are people out there in the world who do that, and I think that's a legitimate and valid way to offer something like this. But for the master's, you would need to have access to groups. So the question would be whether that's feasible. Yeah. Okay, let's see. What sort of age are the students? I am in my 50s. Would I be out of place? No, you would not be the least bit out of place. We have a very wide range of ages. From, well, I can think of a couple in their 60s. And then I think we also might have 20s and 30s and everything in between. No, we have all range of ages. That would be no problem at all. What would make your application stand out? I'm not sure I have much to add to that beyond what I've already said. A really clear interest in MBCT in particular, background experiences that make it clear that you already know something about this. Yeah, well-written essay. There's a little essay. Yeah, I think that might be all I have to say about that one. Do you welcome people who are having their career breaks to take part in this master's course? Well, I think so. I'm not quite sure exactly what you mean. As long as we can see that following, if you take a break to do this master's course, we can see that following the master's course, there is that potential there that I've mentioned before, that potential for you to bring mindfulness in to some professional setting where you could teach courses, and that would make sense. We actually do have a few students now and then who decide once they've started this to take a break. I can think of a handful of students who've been in that situation where they start up this master's program and then they decide they're going to take a break for a little while so they can really focus on it and then go back to whatever their professional environment is, or go back to something similar to that. Okay, next one. Can a student prolong their stay on campus after the teaching blocks, as in use campus resources? Yes, definitely. If you're a student in this program, you are a member of the university, you will have a university card, you will have access to libraries. So yeah, and in fact, we have students who do that. Some students like to hang around in Oxford for extended periods, and that's a lovely thing to do. Let's see. Unable to see the fees easily on the website. I don't have the numbers at hand. If that is not available on the website now, it will be before long. I don't know. Is this one where, Tom, I could refer to you again? Do you have those numbers?
I don't, but because they change slightly every year to adjust for inflation. However, they will be back up online presently, as Ruth suggested. We're hoping next week. The course specific web pages will be live again, and that will also coincide with opening for applications as well. So do check back on the university main site. Alternatively, you can keep half an eye on the Oxford Lifelong Learning course relevant pages, and they will link through to the university website once they're open. All right, so we're hoping for next week, but keep an eye on that, and then the fees will be clearly signposted.
Great. Thank you, Tom. All right, the next one. Do students ever proceed onto a related PhD program, for instance, clinical psychology or philosophy? Do we occasionally have someone go on to a PhD program? It's a minority, but some students do that. Yeah, this could be a good foundation for a PhD program, depending on what it was. I'm seeing that the questions keep coming in, and there was an intention before we started this to finish by a certain time, which we have now passed. But I think we have to bring it to a close now. So I will just say thank you very much to everybody who has come to attend this session. And perhaps we'll hear from you again at a future time.